On May 19th, 2025. A grim discovery was made at a rest stop near Tiwai Valley. Two bobcat kittens alone and clinging to life. They were on druid, hypothermic, and suffering from diarrhea and external parasites, likely due to an improper diet and the loss of their mother. Rushed to a wildlife hospital, the kittens received a round-hit care from a dedicated team fighting to pull them back from the brink. Gradually, the kittens grew stronger and healthier, their spotted coats beginning to gleam. Everyone celebrated their miraculous recovery as their potential release they approached. However, their incredible recovery led to an unforeseen problem. They had become overweight. What happens when the very care that Soviet TRM threatens to keep TRM from ever being wild again? Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The word had been warm, smelling of milk and dusty fur, a rhythmic drumming, the constant backdrop to her life. 10 in a flash of blinding light and a sound that tore the night apart, the warmth, the smell, the drumming. It all vanished. For 2 days, the two bobcat kittens had huddled in the hollow of a juniper root, their tiny bodies pressed together against a cold that seemed to seep from the very soil. Hunger was a sharp beating thing in their bellies, a pain that eclipsed the fear. Their cries, at first insistent, had dwindled to reedy, pathetic mews that the Oregon wind snatched away like dandelion fell off. Their mother, a master of the high desert, had taught them the first lessons of silence and shadow in their 4 short weeks of life. She would have never chosen this place, a noisy, foul-smelling patch of asphalt, where giant roaring beasts came and went. But she had been desperate. Her hunting grounds fractured by the Evrex, expanding ribbon of road. The rest stop, with its overflowing trash cans offered a desperate gamble. It was a gamble she had lost. Earl Thompson felt the chill right through the worn flannel of each year's shirt. At 72, the cold hit a way of finding the old X in each year's bones, a constant reminder of a life spent on the road. It'd been a long haul trucker for 45 years, and the rumble of an engine was more familiar to him than each year's own heartbeat. Now retired and weeded, the silence of each year's small house in the Dells was the loudest sound he knew. He drove each year's old pickup to Bend once a month for a VA appointment, a ritual that did more for each year's loneliness than AT did for each year's arthritis. He pulled into the Tiwai Valley rest stop just as the sun was painting the eastern sky in shades of pale rosy and lavender. He stretched each his back cracking a satisfying report, and he did for the restroom. It was on each way back, as he paused to look out over the vast sage-dotted landscape that he heard meet a faint, incipient cry. He froze each his altars, straining a bird. No, it was too weak, too desperate. He followed the sound, each day's worn letter, boots scuffing on the gravel pad that led to a small picnic area. There, tucked into the Yehpaset roots of An ancient juniper was a miserable little bundle of spotted fur. Ten he. So it was two bundles. Two tiny kittens. Their eyes barely open there. Fur mattered and filthy. They were shivering violently their bodies, trembling with a disparity feeding. Energy. Jarl's heart, ATOF, rodu ui muscle. Give a painful lurch. It's seen a lot of things in each life, but the sight of these two creatures, so small and so utterly alone, struck him to the core. He knew nothing about wild animals, except that you were supposed to live. TRMB, but living these two felt like a death sentence. Their faint cries were a plea he couldn't ignore. Carefully, he shrugged off each stick. Denim jacket. He hesitated for only a moment. 10. Gently, with hints surprisingly defeat. For their size, he scooped the two cold bodies into the warm fleece-lined interior. They barely stirred their weight next to nothing. As he cradled the jacket, he felt a faint, almost imperceptibly, vibration against each bee's chest. A shiver or perhaps the last sputtering effort of a par. He hurried back to each stroke, cranked the heat to full blast, and pointed the nose of the old fort towards bend, driving faster than he had in years. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he knew he had to find help. A quick search on HTS phone, HTS big fingers, fumbling with the small screen, gave him a name. High Desert Wildlife Hospital. Diaranya Sharma looked at the two pathetic creatures nestled in the emergency incubator and felt a familiar mix of anger and sorrow. Anger at the road that had almost certainly claimed their mother and a deep, profound sorrow for the lives it had our referred. What have we got, Ben? She asked her. Voice command professional, betraying none of the emotion churning inside her. Ben Carter, her junior Rehabilitation specialist, read from the Kentucky form. Two bobcat kittens, family. Approximately 4 weeks old, found BYA. Gentleman named Earl Thompson at the TY. Valley rest stop. Hypothermic core temps. Were barely 92. Dehydrated, suffering from severe diarrhea. And he said, wrinkling itchiness, a serious case of fleas and ticks. Anye nodded, pulling on a pair of sterile gloves. Okay, let's get to work. I want subcutaneous fluids now, and let's get a fecal sample to check for internal parasites. I start on the fleas. For the next few hours, the two kittens were the sole focus of the small hospital's university. Any, with the patience of a saint, meticulously come through their fare, with a fine-toothed flare comb, drowning the tiny black parasites in a cup of soapy water. Ben administered the warm fluids, a gentle bulgur appearing under the loose skin of their necks. He prepared a special formula, a high-calorie milk replacer designed for exotic felines, and warmed it to a precise 100 градусов F. The first feeding was a struggle. The kittens were too weak to suckle properly. Anna and Ben had to be fed term, a delicate and risky procedure that involved a sliding 18 flexible tube down their throats and directly into Der stomaches. BT was in vashivi end. Stressful, but it was their only chance. Throughout the entire process, Anna Uaur. What looked like a costume from a Labudegot monster movie. It was a camouflage head covering draped with strips of burlap and artificial leaves, with only a small mesh-covered slit for her eyes. Ben Uaur 1, 2. Remember Ben. Anna had drilled into him. On each year's first day. We are not there. Friends. We are not there matters. We are ghosts. We are invisible forces of nature. The moment they see a human face and connect it with foot and wound, their chances of ever being wild again plummeted. So they worked in silence. Their movements slow and deliberate. Their identities hidden behind the strange leafy masks. They were not people. They were the rustling of the wind, the shadow of a branch. After the feeding, Ben used a warm, damp cotton ball to gently stimulate their rears, mimicking the grooming of a mother cat to encourage them to relieve themselves. It was a job that lacked glamour, but it was as essential as any medicine. For 3 days, the kittens lived on the knives, edge between life and death. They were named not with pet names, but with the sterile geographic markers of their origin. Ty and Dashuts. Ty was the slightly larger one with a feisty spirit that flickered even in her weakness. Dashes was smaller, more timid, her gaze perpetually wearied. On the fourth day, a small miracle occurred, as Ben approached with the warmed formula, take, for the first time, lifted her head and made a weak attempt to latch onto the bottles. Nipple. It was a feeble effort, but it was there. An instinct buried under layers of sickness and trauma had finally resurfaced. By the end of the week, both kittens were drinking eagerly from the bottle. Their tiny and proper tongues working with surprising strength. The staff allowed themselves a collective, cautious sigh of relief. The around his logic care continued, but the frantic edge of emergency was gone, replaced by the steady, hopeful archway of Rehabilitation. The kittens received their antiparasitics treatments and their first round of vaccines. Their diarrhea subsided and their weight began to creep upwards, gram by pressures. Gram. They were moved from the incubator to a larger indoor enclosure filled with natural branches to climb and hollow logs to hide in, and they began to act like bobcats. A shadow pacing the door would send them scrambling for the safety of their log. A hint reaching in to change their outer ball was met with a chorus of fierce, if squeaky, hisses and spits. They began to play their games, a miniature rehearsal for the deadly arts of their species. They stalked each other through the wood, shavings, their bodies low to the ground, their tails twitching. They pounced, their oversized paws clumsy, but their intent serious. Anna watched them on the enclosures. Monitor, a rare small smile touching her lips beneath her camouflage mask. Here remembering who they are, she murmured. Ben, watching beside her, couldn't help but be charmed. Here doing great. Look at TRM go. Here gaining weight steadily. There. Cots are cleaner and healthier. He was right. Their fair, once dull end. Mattered, was nautic and beautifully. Marked with the spots and bars of their kind. Their bodies were filling out. Losing the skeletal tenors that hit. Haunted their first days. In effect, they were filling out. Remarkably well. Weeks turned into months. Summer blazed across the high desert, turning the landscape to shades of gold and brown. Inside the cool, quiet hospital, till I end. They should strive there. They tried there perhaps a little too well. The bottle feeding had given way to a mush of ground meat and tend too small. Whole prey, mice and chicks provided by the center. The kittens dispatched TRM. With a rottler's innate efficiency that was both grim and gratifying to watch. It meant they had the skills. They had the instincts. They also had bellies. I'm starting to get worried, Anna, Ben, said one afternoon in late July. They were reviewing the kittens weekly. Yegging charts. The upward trajectory was not just steady, it was steep. Here healthy, Anna replied, Tau. Her eyes were narrowed with concerness. She watched the live feed. On the screen, Dashes was lying on her back, betting lazily at a pine cone. Her belly was a round, a fluffy drum. Here, more than healthy. Here chubby, Ben, said, finally voicing the odd hate. But Ben thinking. It tickered too. Calling term HDS chubby girls in private, a term of endearment that Anna gently discouraged. Wild bobcats don't have this much. Darn time, Anna mused, tipping a pen against her chin. Or this much readily. Available food. A matter would be making. TRM travel, teaching TRM to hunt for themselves. He'd be burning calories. Constantly. Their rehabilitation, for all its meticulous planning, hit an unavoidable flaw. IT was too safe, too comfortable. They had saved the kittens from starvation. But in doing so, they had introduced TRM to a life of plenty that their wild counterparts could never imagine. A wild bobcat is a creature of lean muscle and taut sinew built for bursts of speed and incredible agility. A layer of fat while a sign of health in a domestic cat was a liability in the wild. IT meant slower reaction times, less stamina, and a greater vulnerability to predators like coyotes or eagles. Not to mention the challenges of catching their own fast-moving prey. The target release date set for late August was fast approaching. To be released, the kittens had to be in peak physical condition. They had to be athletes. Right now, a stick sprawled in a patch of sunlight, looking less like a wild predator and more like a ill-fed house cat. They were far from it. The day of the pre-release assessment arrived. IT was a comprehensive check-up measuring everything from their weight and dental health to their reaction to human presence. The results were sobering. Here overweight, Anna Ernaurnstad. The staff meeting, her voice flayed. Significantly. BY almost 15%. Their muscle tone is good, but it's buried under a layer of subcutaneous fat. Their conditioning is not where it needs to be for a successful release. A wave of disappointment washed over the They had all poured their hearts into these two kittens. They had celebrated every milestone, every his, every successful pounce. To fail now at the final hurdle felt like a betrayal. So what does that mean? Ben asked each DS. Voice quiet. We can't release TRM. We can't release TRM now. Annie corrected him. Releasing TRM in this condition would be irresponsible. It would be a death sentence, just a slur 110 the one day faced at. That rest stop. The release was artificially postponed. The chubby girls, as the staff now, affectionately and worriedly called TRM, were staying. The problem was, what was plan B? They couldn't simply put TRM on a diet. That would be counterproductive to their growth. They needed to change the entire equation. We need to make TRM work for AT, Anya declared. We need to simulate a lean season. We need to make life harder for TRM. The solution was a new, much larger, outdoor enclosure, one that had been under construction for just such difficult cases. It was a half-acre of fenced-in natural habitat complete with sagebrush, juniper trees, and a campfires. Rock pile. It was as close to the real world as they could get. Moving day was stressful. The kittens, now feisty 10 lb. Juveniles, had to be netted and created. They spat and snarled, their fear and anger palpable. When the creatures were opened in the new enclosure, they bolted out and vanished into the brush. 2 streaks of spotted lightning. For 2 days, they were ghosts. Ben watched the remote cameras, each DS. Heart-wrenching with worry. Had they been too harsh? Had they just tried TRM? 10 on the 3rd day, the cameras caught a flicker of movement. It was Ty, creeping cautiously from behind a rock. Her nose twitching, testing the air. Her belly still looked a little round, but her movements were different. They were sharper, more alert. The new feeding regimen began. No more food in a bowl. Now the dead mice were hidden throughout the enclosure, tucked under rocks, placed on high branches, dragged through the dirt to create scent trails. The bobcats had to hunt for TRM. They had to climb, dig, and track. They had to expend energy. They turned into weeks. The high desert autumn arrived, painting the landscape in muted tones and bringing a creepiness to the air. On the camera feeds, a transformation was taking place. The soft, rounded edges of the 2 bobcats were hardening into the sleek, powerful lines of true predators. Their play became more intense, their stalks more patent, their pounces more precise. They were no longer the chubby girls. They were becoming what nature intended TRM to be. In early October, Anna made a phone call. Emma Thompson Earl, she said, this is Dear Chairman from the High Desert Wildlife Hospital. I have some news. About the two kittens you brought us. Back in May. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Day okay.